Now, I'm going to go into, I specifically brought bagels this morning instead of donuts because for me, bagels are easier not to eat than donuts. So it's very fitting with the discussion.
Well, we're very happy to have Davey Boardman here. Probably all of you know Davey. He is a steadfast attendee of Perk, supporter of the Entrepreneurship Center, and Davey's going to talk about his entrepreneurial journey, and I hope he talks about his rock star band, but maybe he won't, but that's okay. I think that's very interesting, so thank you, Davey, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. So, like she said, I think I know most of you. Davey Boardman with Elias Kruse Financial. I'm definitely going to interweave some of my personal story into this. We are going to breeze over some of the sordid history of different ventures. But for those of you that were here last week for Cassie's presentation, that was something that really resonated as far as being like open to exploring different avenues in life to find where you fit in and what your purpose is. So, but to start off, I always get all sorts of different speculation and questions about, I have this experience with financial advisors or financial professionals, and the reason is because there's a lot of different kinds out there that do different things. So in general, I describe it as my job is to help people achieve financial success. The cool thing about that is the way you define financial success is different from how I define financial success. And in fact, different from how everybody in this room defines financial success. So understanding that, a lot of people, it takes kind of asking the right questions to understand that. But even when you understand what your specific definition of financial success is, how do we measure financial success? Does anybody want to answer that? Like personally, how do you measure financial success?
My personal take for financial success, I'm able to do the things that I want to do when I want to do it without fear of not having money later.
That's pretty perfect. Anybody else want to share?
Mine's a little morbid. I always say that I want to retire before I die.
That is a great goal to have.
Yeah.
So,
You want any more?
if you'd like.
I think also for me is financial success is not about me, but it's being able to have the resources and revenue to impact lives and community, including my family legacy.
100%. 100%. So the most common answer I get when you boil past like the goals is I measure financial success by what's in my bank account, by what I've accumulated, by what the wealth that I've accumulated affords me to do. And what's interesting to me about that is the most inefficient way to grow your wealth. But it is kind of the focus point, and it's a very emotional connection as far as the higher that number grows, the better we feel. But does anybody know what interest rate they get on their bank account?
Like less than 1%.
I actually get the answer more often than not now that there are so many high yield savings accounts out there where you can get as high as close to 5%, which is pretty darn good. But that's not going to last forever. That's just kind of where the market is right now. So what we kind of break that down to make it easier for people to understand is since 1935, the annualized rate of inflation has been 3%. So sometimes much more than that, sometimes much less than that. But if you average it out, it's 3% every year. In that same time frame, the S&P 500 has had a return on average of the investment of about 5.5%. So what does that mean? That means life on average gets about 3% more expensive every year. And if you're invested in the stock market in that same time frame, your money grows at about 5.5%. So that's the main goal of any sort of investment strategy, should be to have at least a portion of your money outpace inflation. Something that is different for everybody as far as it's connected to like what the expense of your lifestyle is, what goals you have for the future. Are they specific? Are they, what do you want that to do? But it comes down to a unique equation to every individual. So anybody that wants to answer this question, if not, that's okay too. Do you invest? Why or why not? Jody, yes.
Well, that's the smart thing to do, because if you're not investing, you're not growing.
Great answer. So,
Yes, because of what we talked about a minute ago, we've already, even though we went through our share of struggles, we invest in order to put in place, and it is in place, a legacy of giving.
absolutely.
Yeah, you have to sustain, you have to have that legacy to live, and be able to have a little fun and take a few trips. But long-term, you have your long-term mission statement in place. It's creating a legacy that continues to grow after you're gone.
100%. And based off of those goals, whatever they may be, they don't just happen. It takes putting that plan in place to make sure. So going back to the beginning of, basically there's by and large about 3 different types of advisors generally. The first of which is the insurance-based advisor, where a lot of times when you talk to them, and working in this industry, you hear all sorts of stories where you get the impression sometimes when you meet somebody new that they kind of have a predetermined path when they hear a little bit about you and what you're talking about, where it's like, I think I know what you want to talk to me about. Because we've all encountered financial professionals of usually all 3 of these different types. But the insurance-based advisor, it seems like no matter what you talk to them about, the solution is to buy more insurance, i.e. a product, which every product is a useful tool when used the right way, but it's certainly not the answer to every problem. The second of which type of advisor is the portfolio manager. So that's a very offensive strategy as far as like, how am I going to grow this wealth that I've accumulated and continue to accumulate? But it's just a growth strategy. There's not really a planning aspect to it. And then the third of which is the fee-based financial advisor. And that's where you meet with somebody and it's like, okay, here's the cost of the engagement. Here's all the deliverables in it. After I've met with you, talked to you, I understand where you're at, and here's what I suggest you do. You pay me, and then you go off and implement this plan that I've put together for you. Which, again, everybody's different. Everybody's situation is unique, and that does work for some people. That's what they're interested in. But at the firm that I'm a part of, Elias Kruse Financial, what we do is we combine all 3 of those lanes strategically. So having the right insurances to protect what's important to us, investing efficiently for the goals that we have in mind, but then the third lens, which is actually the most important in my opinion, is making sure that we're looking at your entire financial picture through a tax efficiency lens. That means not only today putting us in an advantageous spot, but at every point down the road that we want access to our funds, that we're never put in a position where we have to pay more out in taxes than we want to. A lot of times it comes to talk about return on investment, but if you're not talking about the tax efficiency aspect, that's almost a direct subtraction from that return on investment. So there's a couple of different schools of counseling when it comes to advising, but we actually adhere to what's called the humanistic behavior or school of counseling. It's where we meet people where they're at and we help them brainstorm and formulate goals, and then we focus on their authentic selves and their freedom to choose the life that they want. We don't direct our clients to, here's what we think you should do. It's more of a, we get to understand what they want and help them achieve that vision. Which is pretty cool because that takes the listening and willing to understand the uniqueness of everybody's situation to get to that point. So how do we get to that point? we get together and we ask a bunch of questions that sometimes catch people off guard, i.e. they've never been asked before, they've a lot of times never thought about themselves. I'm not going to share all of them, but one of my personal favorites that typically catches people off guard is you can gain a lot of insight just from understanding, what did you learn from your parents about money? Did you learn what to do, or did you learn what not to do? And what's most surprising is, of all the times I've answered that question, 99% of the time it's either they considered themselves a success and I learned all these things about what to do, or it's the exact opposite of I do not want to be like them whatsoever. There's a lot of gray area in between those two answers, but typically it falls into one or the other side. The continuation of that question is, let's fast forward 20 years. You know, once we get you to look at what did you learn from your parents, okay, do you have kids? What do you want them to say in 20 years when you ask them, what did you learn from your parents about money? And that all of a sudden transports you through time to really look at the long game of, oh my gosh, there's all these things that we get stuck in the day-to-day navigation of our lives, but putting that far out, like, what would I want that to look like? An answer from somebody else's mouth. So, very interesting. Has anybody ever been asked that question in this room? Or those questions? Yeah? I was gonna say, that's a little bit of a cheat. Or thought about those questions?
Experienced it.
Yeah? As far as your kids answering that question to you?
No, from my parents, single parents, through the Depression, where they were really frugal, and then later became spendthrifts because they supported the whole family through the Depression, and now they had a chance to live. And I grew up in the culture of, if you got it, spend it.
Sure. That adds another dynamic of, beyond those lessons that you've learned from your parents and the environment that you grew up in, is how has life changed in the time since you learned those lessons, and do they still apply? It's a very interesting aspect. So at this point, that's where I talk about, how many people in here have read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad? It's a fantastic book. I'm sure everyone who raised their hand agrees. I didn't read it until just a couple of years ago. The two lessons that I learned from my parents mainly are, work hard at whatever you do and make money to support yourself, and B, don't spend money that isn't yours, i.e. get into credit cards, which was a fantastic lesson. I'm super happy that I never accumulated credit card debt. However, that did lead to a very different kind of lesson that I had to learn at a certain point of not having credit, but that's a different story. Still valuable all the same. But a lot of what I do and help people understand on a daily basis now came from when I got together with my wife. Her dad was a CPA and a financial advisor. And one of his first questions when I got together with his only daughter was, so you're fresh out of the Marine Corps, you're playing in bands, you're working a pretty decent job, what's your plan? I was like, you just said it. That was it. I did not understand how far beyond just the scope of that moment there was to look, especially in my early 20s. But he definitely gave me a crash course in education through the things that I wasn't doing and needed to be implementing, needed to be learning. And then fast forward through a lot of fun life events. In 2018, my wife and I became parents when our first was born in August. And it was one of the happiest times of my life. And 2 months later, at the age of 53, unfortunately, due to medical complications, my father-in-law passed away unexpectedly. So we were amidst being new parents, grieving the loss of a parent, and because he prepared our taxes and did our investing, besides the emotional weight of that moment, we were left trying to deal with, okay, now we need to not only settle this estate, which his will wasn't done, updated for the last almost 15 years. He was partial owner of 3 different companies, and we needed to replace these 2 professional relationships. So it was a lot to navigate as far as life changed really quick overnight. And luckily we were introduced to some people, but that helped us cross the bridge of, okay, I had this relationship that I didn't even know most of this world existed, or at least didn't think it was for me, but I had somebody that was helping me navigate that I never thought. Trust never came into the picture. It was, I'm married to his only daughter, so that was that. He's got our best interest in mind. And through working with somebody, you get the picture of, I didn't realize there were so many different ways to navigate your finances, to navigate investments. But working with somebody who didn't truly understand where we were coming from as a family and where we wanted to, because we ourselves didn't really understand. We needed to be asked the questions like somebody who knew us inside and out did. But they weren't taking the time to kind of meet us where we were at. So it came with a lot of frustrations that led me to look more and more into it, purely for the fact of managing our own family's finances, which brought me to where I'm at now. And the reason I'm at where I'm at is because talking to somebody who truly asked those questions that I didn't even know that I needed to think about the answers to, brought me to a much better understanding of what was not only possible, but what I was headed for. So, aside from that, part of it that I run into a lot with people is retirement. That's the big show, right? That's what a lot of our answers that I asked earlier had to do with retirement, legacy, and beyond. So most of us, if we're lucky enough, we have access to a work-sponsored 401k plan. Though in this room, in this focus suite, that's something that's not a luxury that we have, being an entrepreneur. But even that, there's things that we know, there's options available to us to contribute to that, right? But then you ask the questions, well, how much do I contribute to that retirement? How much do I need to retire? How many years left till I retire? How many years left till I can retire? So even if we could answer every single one of those questions definitively, which would be awesome, what about the time between now and retirement? Are there going to be things that you want to spend money on? Yes. Most of them you don't even know what they are today. So how do I know I'm saving enough for those goals, and where do I save for them? So that's where the picture gets so unique to each individual, to where I like to take it back to what our moms all told us once upon a time, that we're very unique and special individuals, and our financial pictures are unique and individual just like us. So there is no easy answer to it. There's a lot of options, but it comes down to answering the question, what do you want? And the only way to do that is a true to form, actual custom fitted financial plan. So at Elias Kruse Financial, we believe, like one of our core tenets is, everybody deserves a financial plan. And that's the basis for every firm that holds true to our style of advising. That's where every recommendation we make comes from, or every recommendation that we don't make is the result of that financial plan. So to go into a little bit, I don't know how we're doing for time, just fine? Awesome. So clarity and confidence, that's kind of our whole ideal goal, is whatever questions you have in every engagement that we have, we want you to leave understanding more and feeling more confident in what your trajectory is. So this is a fun part of every time somebody comes to my office for the first time. So I'm a team member of Elias Kruse Financial, but the two partners of my firm, Nate Elias and Nate Kruse, started at Northwestern Mutual Insurance Company 15 years ago. So they formed their partnership, and Nate Kruse is actually the district manager of the Northwestern Mutual Lincoln office. So our office is inside Northwestern Mutual's office, but we're an independent broker-dealer investment advisor. So that's where our name comes from, Nate Elias and Nate Kruse, but the shining point is our team. So a lot of times when you meet with an advisor, it's like them and an assistant or two. But what we found is to really get into the comprehensive level of planning that we're not relying on products and preset solutions for, is they've formulated a team to where we have a manager of financial planning, Aaron Linneman, who's been with the team the longest. So every plan that we put together with somebody, no matter who puts it together, what collaboration, he's the final end-all be-all because of his wealth of experience. We have 3 dedicated investment specialists. One who basically we've hired 2 new team members to handle like the day-to-day operations to free up Casey's time to actually look into portfolio management and innovative strategies. And then Taylor, Justina, and myself are what's called second chair advisors. So I was brought onto the team a little over a year ago, basically to some of the clients that the Nates work with now have very complex situations. And so I've taken over some of their simpler clients to free up more time of theirs, but then also build my own book through the business. And then last but certainly not least is Jet County, who missed his opportunity to be a country music superstar with a name like that. But that is his real name. And he handles all of our insurance planning and has actually gotten into backfilling Aaron's position for putting together the financial plans. So with us believing everybody deserves a financial plan, I just wanted to do a quick overview of like how we stand behind that in our process, is because I recently heard a story from somebody I had met who was very, not uncommonly when I meet somebody and tell them what I do, standoffish due to an experience they had, where it took me a while to kind of garner that trust and get them to tell me about their experience, that they met with somebody and paid a substantial sum of money to meet with them a predetermined amount of times under the guise of understanding they would get a financial plan at the end of that engagement. And they ended up buying term insurance from this person and never seeing a financial plan, which is all too common, unfortunately. So our process is such is that when we meet with people, we get together for what we call a fact-finding meeting, where we just ask them all these questions that I've talked about to understand where they're at, where they're trying to go, where they're headed on their current trajectory. And then once we have that ability to kind of slip ourselves in their shoes and see life through the lens, and we combine that with our experience and expertise, then we get together for a second meeting where we present them with that financial plan. And that's an actual document, depending on the complexity of your situation, between like 50 and 150 pages, getting as zoomed in a view as we can to where we leave as little as possible to chance in the future. We don't have a crystal ball, obviously nobody does, otherwise it'd be a very different world. But we like to consider all avenues as closely as possible to make sure that if any eventuality happens, we've at least thought about it and planned for it. So it's in that meeting that we call the education jam session, which kind of really relates back to, you know, the rock star thing of getting together, asking questions, educating to the point that you want to understand, and giving you the opportunity to poke holes in it, fire bullets at it, whatever you need to do. And it's at that point that we decide, after we've met each other, A, is this a relationship we want to continue? Is it beneficial for us to continue? Or do we send you in the direction of, based off what we understand, this would be the best solution for you? Because we are what's called fiduciaries in the industry, which that term can apply to different industries related to financial services in different ways. But we are legally bound to act in our client's best interests. We have to document that and show at every turn, with everything that we consider, that this is the decision we made, the recommendation we made, and here's why. And so even if that means, I'm looking at your situation and I think you'd be better suited to work with this company, then we do that. So everything that we do, our guiding light in every engagement, is based off of our clients' or prospective clients' core values. So we don't have opinions on this is how you should do it. It's more of an efficiency thing. Like I said, we understand what you want to do, and then we tell you what the best way to do it is. That being said, we do have our own core values, and this is another thing that attracted me to this firm in the first place, is the first of which is we are authentic. And we like to joke and say, I don't know if you noticed from the pictures, but we have 2 team members with pretty serious mustaches. So if that's not authentic, I don't know what is. But we say it as we are who we say we are. Maybe we're right for you, maybe we're not. Second of which is diligent, meaning we do what we say we're gonna do. We consider every avenue to do with every plan, whether it pertains to that plan or not, just so we can say we know why it doesn't pertain to that plan. And the third of which is my personal favorite, is trailblazing. To us, that means taking the tried and true methods of the past, these things that have been proven time and time again to work, but never settling for that as the status quo. Always challenging and asking that question, is there a better way to do this, or is there something unique about your situation that changes that? So, yeah, that's pretty much who we are. So I like to say it, the best part of what I get to do is getting to a point with people where a lot of these decisions, these questions come with a lot of emotional weight. And throughout life, you kind of get used to carrying it, and you kind of settle for not understanding certain things. What's gonna happen? I can't figure that out, so I decide not to try and figure that out, because life gets busy, everything happens in the day-to-day, and this really requires getting off the hamster wheel every once in a while and taking a bird's eye view at things. So the biggest compliment that we get when we work with somebody is that, again, what we strive for, of the clarity and confidence to say, man, I just understand so much better, and it feels good to understand what I'm doing, what it's getting me towards, and that's exactly where I want to end up. So whether it's with our firm or with somebody like us, I like to say, whether you're 25, 45, or young at heart trying to figure this life out at 65, 75, 85.
Next week.
Oh, congratulations. Just imagine the weight that comes off your shoulders when you answer these questions, when you figure out, well, what tomorrow comes, what tomorrow comes, is that where I want to be? So, at this point, I'd love to open it up for questions, but keeping in mind, and this was again mostly for Bill's benefit, that I can't answer specific questions, but generally.
Tell us more about you.
Well, I live out in Waverly with my wife. We've been married for 10 years. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. So outside of you seeing me at different networking events or meeting with clients or prospective clients at coffee shops, that takes up every second of my life.
Because that part B of that question for you was going to be, how are you doing at maintaining life balance?
I focus on being on a great team where Nate Elias specifically keeps an eye on my calendar and will yell at me if I'm not spending time at home and literally kick me out of the office if I have night meetings the day before. But again, that was a big part of the first 2 years that my son was born. I was working for a retail vape company here in town, which is a whole nother story that I love to share with people. But between working for a company that had explosive growth, and we were dealing with federal regulation, there was the summer of 2016, I remember telling my wife, just a couple more months like this between helping run this company, going to legislative sessions, going to these auxiliary advocacy meetings, all these things, just a couple more months and it's going to slow down. And then the next time life really hit us with a gut punch was 2 years later in 2018 when our son was born and my father-in-law passed away. And I was like, you remember 2 years ago when I said a couple more months? And then before I knew it, trying to figure out our finances and deal with that hectic time of life, and the pandemic hit and our daughter was born in May of 2020 was the next time that it was like, all right, now it's been 4 years in the blink of an eye, and I say I want to put a focus on that balance, and it's time to put a focus on that balance. And so that's, again, like I make my schedule every day. I get to custom fit like when I'm meeting with other people and make sure that if I take time in the evening, then I get to make time to, I just went to the zoo earlier this week with my kids at 10 a.m. So that was a big part of factoring into this as a career choice beyond just wanting to manage my own finances. So it was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but Quinn.
So how do you deal with, I know the government at one point in time was trying to usurp your services and just have people's retirement funds go directly into S&P 500 accounts, those
Index funds.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
index funds. And so they would just go directly with that. What would be your argument to someone who says, well, yeah, hey, I invest, I put it there, it's doing, I own in the market, I have it in those funds, they're doing well.
That's honestly one of the most efficient ways to do it. And when it comes to, everybody's different, but it honestly takes discipline to do that. And if you can do that without accountability or holding yourself accountable to somebody, that's a part of, I get it a lot when people ask me or they reference what I do of like, hey, you're a finance guy, you're a numbers guy, right? It's like, well, the math of it's very simple. Like you said, of just investing in an index, it's very hard to beat the market as far as do better than the S&P 500 is like the 500 biggest US companies. And there's a lot of work that goes into maintaining that fund, and it's very hard to beat it. So investing in just an index fund is a great way to do that. But when it comes to working with somebody, the value proposition is to help me navigate that in times when one of the biggest faux pas you can make in investing is when the market goes down. It's a very emotional time. It's a very emotional feeling of, oh my gosh, I just lost X amount of dollars. And the knee-jerk reaction is to pull it out and realize that loss. So part of what we do, especially leaning so heavily into the planning of like, okay, life happens and sometimes we want to make these decisions in the moment, but here's what the goals were, here's what the priorities. Has that changed? Or just giving that ability to kind of wait a bead before making those reactions. So it's really the human behavioral aspect that we really add the most value to.
Good answer. I mean, I'm for retirement services.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's an argument that comes back at the government level, especially. People are paying fees.
Yep.
For those services, and there's no need when they can just do this. People are getting taken advantage of. Well, yeah, but getting taken advantage of buying a soda at a gas station that's $4 when you can get it for $1.50 at the grocery store.
Yep.
So anyway, that's just one thing. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, do you find it? What type of hurdles do you find with younger people in getting that thought process out down the road? Is it any different than generationally? Do you see any differences?
It's interesting because I get that question fairly often, and I would say yes, but I've met it's not a difference of generationally. I'd say it's more a difference of, again, every one of us is unique. I've met recently, a 24-year-old business owner who already has everything in place that he can have in place. And that's kind of like what a lot of our referrals who come to our firm that we don't meet out in the wild, we call it, like they get told to come to us because by somebody that we work with, it's like, oh, you got to meet these guys, they're great. And so he was introduced to us, and it's like, literally, we'll look over everything and give you our opinion, but there's nothing that we would change about what you're doing. That's a 24-year-old who sought out not only to work with somebody initially, but then to double check from a second firm, which is very, very uncommon for a 20-year-old. So there's exceptions to the rule, but generally, no, I'd say a lot of young people actually have lived through part of that experience of the pandemic of like, oh gosh, well, I want to figure out how to balance, how to maximize my life today, while at the same time not ending up in a financially like implicated situation in the future. So I want to learn this stuff more so now, especially with that access to information on the internet. We're inundated with all these different options. So it's easier to learn about these things than it ever has been before. I feel like in older generations, it was if you were lucky enough to have those people in your life that were experienced in it or had that knowledge, and you were smart enough to listen to them, that's awesome. But a lot of us, like our financial understanding, like our financial literacy is very limited to the community that we grew up in. Whereas with a lot of younger people today, that global community is much more accessible.
Being the old guy in the room, when I grew up, financial literacy, that term, or the whole concept was never talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It was, coming out of World War II with families and the whole rebuilding of the culture of America was day-to-day work and having a paycheck to buy groceries. And for most people, there was not, or at least the culture I grew up in, there was not that talk of investment or savings. It was literally rebuilding for post-war. And so as our culture, my group has matured, it's been an ongoing life learning experience. And how to do that, how to manage it, where younger generations like yourself and 20-year-olds, they've been exposed, many of them, whether they choose to use it or not, have been exposed to opportunities of cultural, financial growth. Dave Ramsey, whether that's or yourselves or whatever, working on a board with David Steinberg, with the veterans right now. The VA has come to us, want to know if we'll support their health support, and I'm going to talk to you about that. Financial peace for veterans starting to get their life back together because they never knew how to manage dollars or their money.
Right.
So we're sponsoring about 20 a year through the
Well, that's another thing of like the regularity of the 1st and the 15th in the military.
Well, exactly.
Of living outside of that.
And they've gone through PTSD and they've gone through all kind of other experiences. That's real low on their priority unless the recovery to start with. It needs to be higher, but it's not.
Agreed.
Where do you find mindset? Does mindset factor into your equation?
In a number of different ways. Not only for my client's mindset of understanding that, but also my own mindset of navigating these things of working with people on an individual basis. A lot of times it's a emotional conversation because finances are a very emotional thing. And I consider myself somewhat of an empath, to where I can have a tendency of having a very heavy conversation with somebody and walking away from that like, now I'm carrying some of those thoughts, some of those feelings, where it takes conscious intention to not carry that on to the rest of my day. But mindset as far as habit formation, for your finances is 100%. How do you view what you're doing? You know, human beings in general are habitual by nature. So we get used to doing something and we don't put a whole lot of thought into why we're doing it. And it's when you're asked those questions of why are you doing this? And you say, well, I'm doing this. Why? To achieve this effect. Cool. Have you ever considered doing it this way to achieve that effect better? Honestly, no. That's all factored into that mindset.
Well, we always ask speaker, another question?
Just a couple. First of all, have you read Everyday Millionaires by Kruse?
Nope.
Is a good book talking about what you're talking about and how to live below your paycheck, invest to your fullest. I would disagree to a certain extent that I find, at least in my business, that there's a lot of financial illiteracy, and in the generation of, and it's not just the younger, it's also in the, okay, I want it now, I don't care what I'm gonna spend, I don't care whatever. So that for someone like you, your business is needed for the fact that, okay, I understand you want that fill in the blank now, but we're looking at 10 years down the road. Is that gonna help you to that goal or whatever? Can we put it on hold for a while? And again, Philip, in my world, start saving for it, but wait,
Yep.
and not the instant gratification.
And that's part of, totally agree. And that's an interesting concept as far as like when you come to, it's part of deciding whether you want to work with somebody or not.
That's part of what you're saying.
In my line. But something that I found very interesting to help people kind of have their own shift in that perception is save first, spend what's left. I.e., like, I don't want to change your entire lifestyle to where you can't do the things that you want to do, but let's get you to think about and answer what's important beyond today, and then what can we do to actually start making progress towards those goals, and then you can keep living the lifestyle that you're living as long as we set it up in such a way where you are contributing towards these goals, and then you can keep on living the way that you're living, all the while understanding I'm building towards these goals. So that way it's not a huge behavior shift, it's just cool, let's just do this, you take care of it for me, I don't have to feel the pain of it, I'll just get used to this and make that my new normal. So
Your product offerings, are they mostly within the Northwestern Mutual or with being an independent broker in there? Are you able to bring other products in to meet customer needs?
that is a very deep question.
Sorry.
No, it's great. So I have access to every company's offerings in the position of us being an independent broker-dealer. But with us having that strategic partnership with Northwestern Mutual, I can offer Northwestern Mutual. And there's a number of good reasons why. In a lot of cases, they are the best option. But what's interesting is there's other good companies. But if you're affiliated with, say, Mass Mutual or New York Life, you don't have access to Northwestern Mutual, but I do have access to those companies. So, and that's, as I've come to understand it, due to the exceptional oversight of Northwestern Mutual and them wanting to maintain a certain level of compliance and quality control in the way that their products are utilized. So, good question.
All right, so I'll ask you the questions that we ask of all of our guest speakers. So, what gets you up in the morning? What gets you perked up?
My son, who usually wakes up before me. And just like literally most of my days are going out and having conversations with people. It's the days where I don't have conversations with people that are like, oh my gosh, like you have to spin your wheels figuring out how to get in those engagements, how to get out and meet more people, to where if that's how I'm measuring my day-to-day success, like I'm sure most of you in here have had conversations with me that's that's my main prerogative in life outside of my family, is just meeting people. So
We also like to get your recommendations on local businesses that you would like to do business with, be that restaurants, any type of business. What are some of your favorites?
So one that I would love to see more people utilize as services, because I think it's a unique offering to Lincoln, and I really want to make sure that he's around for a long time, is Manuel Walker with Nebraska Knockerball. It is an awesome company. It's the giant balls that you run at each other. He's got bounce houses. He's got life-size human foosball. And something that we utilize as services for more than anything else is he also offers Nerf battles in his space. So we have Nerf parties for my son and his friends, to where he sets up all these inflatable obstacles, he supplies all the guns and darts, and then his son actually comes in and spends about an hour and a half to 2 hours just constantly reloading Nerf guns for all the kids so they don't have to slow down and stop playing.
Oh.
It's amazing.
And where is his business located?
It's over in between 14th and 27th, like just off of Cornhusker. So if you know where Spikes Volleyball is, it's just out in front of that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Davey today? All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Next week, our speaker will be Brad Lukey. I may have mispronounced his last name, so Brad, if you're watching, I apologize for that, but we look forward to seeing you next week. Everybody have a great week, safe weekend, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.